And there's several links there, but one that you really want to make sure that you have available to yourself is a document that we all worked on up here on participant case file resource guide. I have Angela looking at me. Am I doing something wrong? Okay. Excuse me, everybody. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm getting a red flag or something. Okay. I apologize, everyone. So I'm going to get us started. We're having some recording issues here. We have 90, almost 100 people on here, so we're very excited. So what I would like to do is to invite to talk about the learning objectives. So today we're going to talk about the purpose of a monitoring review. What is it? Why do we monitor? How do we monitor our grants? Also looking at the core monitoring guide, the key areas of the core monitoring guide that relate to you all. We're also going to talk about trying to combat any findings. We don't want to come out there. We're not there to get you or got you. Again, a lot of times our grantees will say, oh, my FPO's coming out to get me or to get, to punish me. We're not there to do that. We're here to help you all be very successful. When you look good, again, we said this before, we look good. So we're here to make sure that you are all on the up and up with your monitoring. And when we come out to monitor, you're all in up with your case files, with your fiscal files. Everything's in order. And because we don't want you to get audited and have findings from somebody outside of us. So thank you for just learning about what to do, what to have in order when folks come out to monitor your grants. And we're here to help you make sure we correct, again, how to avoid those findings and to correct them if there are any findings. And finally, I'm going to be doing a review of participant files. We've had several questions about what is a participant file, what has to be in a participant file, and yes, participant files are critical to the success of your grant. They help the FPOs monitor your grant, as well as help you keep records of the activities that are happening for each of the students who are involved in the YCC grant. So we're going to go into a detailed conversation about participant files today. I would like to introduce myself, Maisha Meminger. Everybody pretty much has met me over the course of the last couple of years. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I'll be moderating as well as covering participant files. And we have my colleague from Region 6, Alina. Alina, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. I practiced it, and I'm just scared to say it. So, Alina, are you on with me? You can unmute your
Yes, I'm here.
Hey.
It's Melasticanova. Hello.
Melasticanova, thank you. And then we have Debbie Galloway, who's our colleague who works at our National Office of Grants Management. Debbie, do I have you with me?
Yes, you do.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So I'm going to ask Angela to make Alina the presenter, and Debbie and I are going to mute our phones so we can learn about monitoring. And Alina, you can forward your slides as at will.
Thank you, Maisha. Hello, everyone. We're going to start with discussing the purpose of monitoring. And basically, we conduct monitoring to ensure that the grants are meeting their goals and objectives and are operating in compliance with the federal regulations and grant requirements. Monitoring is an opportunity for the Department of Labor to identify and correct any issues early on, providing required technical assistance. It's also an opportunity to identify any innovative and promising practices that can be shared with the rest of the workforce development system. There are two methods for grant monitoring. We try to conduct monitoring reviews at least once during the lifetime of the grant. And the most common method used by ETA is the on-site monitoring review, conducted on-site by your FPO with the assistance of our fiscal times when needed. There are also virtual reviews that are called the Enhanced Desk Monitoring Reviews, or EDMRs, and they are conducted by telephone or video conferencing. Both on-site reviews and EDMRs are scheduled at least 30 days in advance and take 2 to 5 days to complete, depending on the complexity of the grant. So now we're going to talk about, we're going to walk through the monitoring review process. The on-site monitoring reviews are usually conducted closer to the middle of the period of performance of the grant, and a formal 30-day review notification letter is issued by the Department of Labor prior to the review. With this letter, the grantee receives a copy of the core monitoring guide and a review planning tool supplementing the guide. I'm sorry, I think I'm on the wrong slide. No, sorry. So both of these documents are available for download as handouts for today's webinar. The core monitoring guide is used to conduct the on-site monitoring reviews, and you can see a picture of it on your screen right now. This is a generic guide examining the basic core activities that are found in all ECA grants, and it is intended to determine the readiness and capacity of the grantee to operate the grant. The guide is organized around 5 core activities that are now listed on your screen. DOL is currently in the process of updating the core guide, and a new version reflecting the uniform guidance requirements will be released soon, and you will be notified when it is. So basically, we're going to work with you to establish the date of the review and the time frame for the review, and issue a formal letter. And we're going to send out the core monitoring guide and the review planning tool with this letter. My slides are a little bit different. Anyway, so the review planning tool is the second document that's sent out with the core monitoring guide. When you receive that letter, you will receive a review planning tool. It basically, it was developed using the core monitoring guide, and it follows the activities and objectives of the guide. And it was developed to help you prepare for the review. The tool lists the documents that will be needed by the FPO to complete the review of each objective, as well as the estimated amount of time needed to complete the review of each core activity, and also the staff that will be interviewed for each objective. All documents and materials listed in the review planning tool should be retrieved and made available for the review, and this will make the process more efficient. The review planning tool that you see on your screen is also available for download, but it's an optional document, and it may not be used by all FPOs in all regions. All reviews begin with the entrance conference, during which the FPO discusses the review process and the next steps with the grantee staff. They also finalize the agenda, answer any questions the grantee may have. Some FPOs request a list of participants to be made available for the entrance conference to randomly select a sample of files for the participant file review. So we're now going to review all activities of the core monitoring guide one by one. And I will start with the core activity 1 that addresses design and governance principles that can guide and support grantee strategy for developing a demand-driven workforce system. This section focuses on strategic planning, service design, and program integration. Here are some questions that are usually asked during the review of the core activity 1. The discussion of the design and governance of the grant usually involves the grantee leadership and program managers and focuses on the overall design and operation of the program. The reviewer determines if the program is structured as described in the grant agreement scope of work. It is also important to know if the program is fully integrated and strategically aligned with other community resources. The conversation also includes a discussion of partners' involvement with the grant program. And now I'm going to turn to Debbie Galloway, who will walk you through core activities 2 and 3. Debbie?
Yeah, thank you, Elena. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Elena, can you? Okay, great. Thank you, Elena. Now I will discuss the areas and systems that affect the overall grant management and program management of your grant. And this is also known as the core activity 2. Both a program review and financial review would cover objectives 2.1 through 2.9. For a review that is only financially focused, it would delve a little bit deeper, and it would expand the review to include items 211 that is in italics, facilities and other capital assets, as well as 2.12 intangible property. Hold on, let me move my slide. Okay. Along with the elements that are contained on this slide, you have 12 elements here. You may notice that the one element is missing, 2.10, and that is specific to WIA waivers. And since this is for a discretionary program, that objective will not be covered. As indicated earlier, monitoring is an important element of ETA's overall strategy to improve grant administration. By identifying best practices and areas of weaknesses during a site visit, the grantee has an opportunity to make improvements by installing or replicating a best practice and correcting areas of non-compliance, both of which will have a positive impact on your program and its success. There are 10 key areas in core activity number 2. The first one that I will go over will be administrative controls that will cover.
Do you want me to progress you? Would you like me to progress?
Oh,
that's okay. I'll progress. Sure. Just let me know when you're ready to go to the next slide. I'll present. Thanks.
Okay. The next objective is 2.2 personnel, and that is where the SPO will examine the salaries and fringe benefits of the individuals being paid out of the grant funds, as well as the timekeeping systems that are in place. Additional objectives that are covered under Core Activity 2 will include civil rights, sustainability, match requirements, the examination of your equipment policies and records, procurement, which would include your policies and records, audit and audit resolution, and the reporting systems. And reporting systems would include both the participant and financial reporting systems. I think we need to take one step back, or 2 steps back, to 2.1. Okay. So under the first objective of Core Activity 2 is the administrative controls. And this is where we look at the basic internal control framework. Internal controls are an essential element in a company's operations. Internal controls help to ensure that federal funds are spent for the purposes in which they are intended and is key to preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. Effective internal controls are designed to accomplish 3 things. 1, to safeguard assets. 2, to promote operational efficiency at both the program and financial level. And 3, encourage adherence to companies' policies and procedures from all staff working with participants. And this would also include the managers. By first looking at written policies and procedures, the SPO is validating the strengths of your organization's internal control framework. Policies in key areas should not only be formalized in writing, but communicated to all staff. One way to ensure the adherence to policies and procedures is to provide adequate training to central office staff, field office staff, managers, and board members. One of the key areas in which the SPO will look at is whether or not there is a monitoring procedure in place. If you are an organization that has subrecipients, there should be policies in place to conduct timely monitoring. There should also be a timetable in which to conduct the monitoring, a tool to use when performing the monitoring, and steps to issue a report and notify the subrecipient of issues and steps to reach resolution or corrective action. The next policy that the SPO will look at is the record retention and access. Does your organization have a schedule to secure, store, and properly dispose of both financial and participant records within the prescribed timeframe, which is at least 3 years after the last financial report has been filed or when the last audit finding was resolved? Such policies should also look to ensure that there are sufficient controls in place to prevent the misuse or mishandling of personally identifiable information, commonly known as PII information, that not only includes individual Social Security numbers, but other sensitive data. Some additional areas in which the SPO will look at are some key areas that I will be discussing in core objective number 3. So there should be there should be written financial policies that govern cash management, payroll, fringe benefits, procurement, and procurement should cover small purchases, professional services, and supportive services. The last part of this objective, administrative controls, the SPO will look to see that the grantee has sufficient policies and processes in place to address grievances and complaints along with incident reporting. Incident reporting is the system that is in place to report possible fraud, waste, and abuse. Next slide, please. The next objective is personnel. Are there sufficient written policies that address the hiring, selection, pay rate, and promotions of employees that are being paid from grant funds? The FPO will look at the organizational chart, payroll reports, and tie them back to the approved budget to ensure that the number of FTEs and salary levels are consistent with the latest approved budget. Also part of this review is looking to see that the salary of any person charging a portion of their salary in whole or directly does not exceed the salary and bonus limitation. This provision is contained in the terms and conditions of your grant agreement. And lastly, the SPO will look at timesheets and time and activity records to ensure that anyone who is being charged or to ensure that anyone who is charging time to the grant is actually working on the grant, so attesting to the benefit received. Next slide, please. Moving on to 2.3, civil rights. The FPO will look to see that there are policies in place to show that the grantee is committed in complying with the federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against age, color, disability, and other areas as prescribed in Title VI and in 29 CFR 37.3. The grantee must have a system in place to handle such complaints and steps to inform the Civil Rights Center. The last part of this civil rights section, the FPO will also look at the facility in which the program is being operated in. Is it physically accessible to individuals that have disabilities? Next slide, please. 2.4, sustainability. The SPO, or as indicated in the SPA, grantees are required to have a plan in place to sustain the grant activities after the grant award. The SPO will examine that proposed plan to ensure that services are continued after the grant has ended. Next slide. The next big section is 2.5, match requirements. This is a big area of concern in which many of you have questions on. The SGA requires a 25% match in your grant application. And contained in your grant application, you have identified community partners that are committed to helping you reach that match goal. As with many other key areas, this too is an area that requires a written policy so that fiscal, program staff, and partners working on this grant are on the same page and are clear about the documentation needed to support any match claimed and recognized on the ETA 9130 form. Match is defined as additional non-federal resources expended to further the grant objective, if required by statute or within the grant agreement as a condition of funding. All matching funds must be spent on allowable grant activities and in accordance with the cost principles. Thus, match must be gauged against 3 common standards, and that is reasonable, necessary, and allocable. The grantee cannot claim a cost as both an allowable cost charged to the grant and as match. Match expenditures should be reported on the recipient share of the 9130. There are 2 types of match that we commonly see out there. One is cash and in-kind. Cash is where donations are actually remitted to the grantee, and the grantee uses those funds in support of their program. Records should be made available to show the receipt of the donations to the expenditure of those matching funds. The other type of match is in-kind, which is the most common form of match. For in-kind match, there is no exchange of dollars, but instead a partner provide support through services or products that are paid directly from their funds, but they do benefit the YCC program. Records for in-kind match is a bit trickier in the sense that it is the grant recipient's responsibility to ensure adequate documentation is available for review to support such costs. For instance, if there are persons that volunteer their time to work with YCC participants, there should be timesheets available to document the time spent on working with those individuals, as well as the rate in which their time has been valued. Valuation of the services must be equivalent to the services being rendered. In an example, say a community partner such as a CEO of a local law firm teaches a GED class during the evening for YCC participants. The value of his or her time is calculated at the rate in which a teacher in the local labor market area would receive if teaching GED classes, and not at the rate of his or her salary as a lawyer. For other in-kind contributions, the value placed on match, again, must be reasonable, necessary, and eligible. In another example, say you received a donation of 100 textbooks that, looking on Amazon.com or usetextbooks.com, you find that there are 3 recent revisions or 3 updates to that particular textbook. At the time the textbook was actually published, the value of that textbook would be $75. But at the time of the donation, when looking at the used textbooks website, the textbook is now valued at $25. So your match that would be claimed for that donation would not be at the $75 rate, but at the $25 rate, because this is what the current fair market would support in the purchase of that textbook. Again, with match, it is the responsibility of the grant recipient to document and support the cost and value of the match in its records. Next slide, please. Equipment. Many of you may have, as part of your approved budget, purchases for equipment. The FPO will look at whether or not you received prior approval for any equipment purchases, and will also look to see that there is adequate records in place to ensure the security and safeguarding of that equipment. The federal definition for equipment is defined as tangible, non-expendable personal property, including exempt property, charged directly to the award and having a useful life of more than 1 year and an acquisition cost of $5,000 or more. If you are in the process of purchasing equipment, you must formalize your request in writing and send it to the FPO. As part of that request, you must identify and describe the equipment that is to be purchased, the useful life, and the actual cost of that equipment. Other things that the FPO will be looking at while looking at equipment is making sure that inventory is being conducted in a timely manner, and the minimum requirement is that a physical inventory is conducted at least 2 years, that there are internal controls or safeguards in place to ensure that any equipment is locked up at night, and that if there is opportunities or they find that the equipment is no longer usable, that the disposition of that equipment is approved by the grant officer before it's disposed. Next slide, please. One other element that is examined during a review is the procurement process, and this is also known as the purchasing process. The FPO looks to ensure that all procurement or purchasing actions are conducted in a manner that provides for full and open competition. Policies should be in place to outline the steps that cover micro purchases, and these would be things that are of routine nature, such as office supplies, that may be cost ineffective to obtain bids, but there should be procedures in place on how those micro purchases are being made. Next, the purchasing policy or procurement process should outline how small purchases are being made and larger purchases that would include the issuance of a request for proposal, an RFP. As part of this process, the SPO will also look at your conflict of interest policy. It will look at the evaluation and the rating factors used to score proposals that come in from an RFP and how a contractor was selected. And the last part of this section is that the SPO will also look at the actual contracts that are in place between the grant recipient and the contractor. There are specific contractual provisions that must be contained in contracts, and those can be found in 29 CFR 95 Appendix A and 29 CFR 97.36. And these include such provisions that would address Equal Opportunity Act, the Copeland Anti-Kickback Act, the Davis-Bacon Act, Clean Air Act, other non-discrimination requirements, and drug-free workplace, to name a few. Next slide, please. The next element that the SPO will be looking at is the audit and audit resolution process. First, the SPO will look to see that if you're an agency that has met the threshold, that you have had a single audit completed in a timely manner, and that the report has been submitted in a timely fashion to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. The SPO will also look at the process in place that the grant recipient has installed to ensure that any subrecipients that have received grant funds also adhere to these requirements. And it is the responsibility of the grant recipient to review the audit reports of the subrecipients to ensure that any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified or written up against the program are adequately resolved, and if any question costs are identified, that those are paid back. It is something to note under the uniform guidance, the threshold in which a single audit is required will be moving up to $750,000. The current threshold is $500,000. Next slide, please. And one of the last objectives under core activity 2 is the reporting system. The SPO will look at the reports submitted to DOL on program goals and expenditures. It will attest to ensure that the systems used to generate those reports are sound and secure, and determine whether or not those reports are submitted on time. As indicated earlier at the start of my presentation, there are 2 additional objectives that will be mainly focused when a financial review is conducted, and that is the facilities and capital assets and intangible property. Now moving on, next slide please, is core activity 3. And this centers around all of the financial management systems. The financial management systems will include all of these items listed in this slide that govern budget controls, cash management, and program income, the method in which you allocate both direct and indirect costs, the policies in place to determine whether or not a cost is allowable, internal controls, and the systems that are used to generate financial reports. 3.9 cost classification is an additional objective that is used while conducting a financial review, and that focuses on mainly whether or not a cost is correctly identified as either a program cost or an administrative cost. Now moving on into the meat of this objective, there are 7 basic standards in which all systems should be built around. These standards should ensure that there are sufficient systems in place and policies in place to generate the necessary financial reports expected by you to be submitted to the Department of Labor, that there are sufficient accounting records in place to identify all the revenues received, all the disbursements made, and all expenditures incurred. Internal controls, as discussed under core activity number 2, we again look at the internal control framework. Allowability of cost. Is there policies or systems in place to ensure that only allowable, allocable, necessary, and reasonable costs are charged to the program? And source documentation. Is there a sufficient audit trail to identify and trace through the system that the adequate approvals are being obtained before cost is being incurred? In cash management systems, we not only look at your checking accounts, but any tangible assets that may have a cash value, such as any transit cards, bus cards, or tokens that are given to YCC participants. Next slide, please. So the 3 cornerstones in which every cost is measured as being allowable is reasonable, necessary, and allocable. For a cost to be reasonable, it must be determined as necessary to carry out the goals of the grant. After the decision of necessity, reasonableness must be evaluated. Often, reasonableness is described as an amount that a prudent person would pay in like circumstances. Necessary means, again, that it is needed or required in order to carry out the requirements of the program. And allocable, a grant must be only charged its fair share of costs. This means that costs may not be charged to a grant if they do not benefit the grant or achieve its performance objectives. Next slide, please. Here is a quick chart for all of the grantees that were awarded funds before December 26th. These are where you can find the requirements governing cost principles and cost allocation, as well as audit requirements and administrative requirements that would touch upon financial systems such as your procurement systems and financial reporting. Next slide, please. Hopefully, many of you have heard that there has been a recent consolidation by OMB that merges 8 existing OMB circulars into one single document. And this single document is called the Uniform Guidance. Some people have called it the Super Circular. But for any grant funds that have been awarded or received after December 26, 2014, these are the rules in which you must follow for administrative requirements, audit requirements, and cost principles. We also have this handy chart available on our website, and that link is located at the bottom of your screen, and that is at the grants landing page. Next, I think I'm going to have to speed up because we're almost halfway done, but nearly 3/4 of the time is lapsed. Okay, so the basics with the accounting records and source documentation. There must be sufficient documentation in place to ensure that any purchase or cost being incurred follows the policies that are outlined by your agency, as well as making sure that they are allowable for this particular grant. Next one. Budget controls. A good budget process begins as a routine chore or task performed at the start of the fiscal year and presented to the board. The process should not end here. Budgets help managers anticipate potential problems in a timely basis. The budget process should be fluid and have the buy-in of both program and fiscal staff, and periodically updated to reflect any adjustments. The SPO will look at the expenditures against its approved budget and will ask you to show where you stand at any given time for any particular cost category. Next slide, please. Cash management. The FPO will not only look at the way your organization forecasts cash needs. The financial requirements for the forecasting of cash needs is limiting the time between the receipt of cash to the disbursement. So we don't want to see a lot of cash on hand. There should be a policy in place that addresses advances. If advances are given to subrecipients, there should be a policy in place to monitor the liquidation of those advances, along with other things that tie to cash, such as petty cash funds, credit cards, purchasing cards, gas cards. And included in those policies and procedures, there should be sufficient internal controls to ensure that there are an adequate segregation of duties that limits the person's access to the request, the receipt, and disbursement of those dollars. Next slide. Program income. If your organization is earning program income, and this is revenue earned in excess of expenditures, and this is commonly found in some youth programs, such as the Youth Build program, where if they sell birdhouses as part of their Youth Build operation, and the money that they make from those birdhouses has to be placed back into the program, because it was federal funds that were used to build those birdhouses. So the FPO will look to see that there's adequate policies in place to track, report, and expend those dollars. Along with that, they will look to see that any program income earned and expended is properly reported on the EPA 9130 form. Next slide, please. Cost allocation. There are many ways in which costs can be allocated. They can be allocated through an indirect cost rate or a cost allocation plan. With either an indirect cost rate or a cost allocation plan, if you're an agency that has more than one federal source of funds, you have to get that indirect cost rate or cost allocation plan approved. So the FPO will be looking to see that you have an approved rate or plan in place and that it's being applied properly to this particular program. Next slide, please. The allowability of costs, not only will the FPO look at the policies and procedures, but through the sampling of a series of transactions from a variety of different cost categories, including payroll reports, travel vouchers, subcontracts or subagreements, they will then determine if that particular cost is allowable, allocable, necessary, and reasonable to achieve the objectives of this program. Going on to 3.6, internal controls. As indicated under core activity number 2, we will look at internal controls and the internal control framework. We will look at this to see that there are sufficient separation of duties, that assets are safeguarded, as well as the systems that are used to enter in the data is safeguarded. Next slide. Financial reporting. Commonly, what the FPO will do is print out 9130 reports that the organization has filed and trace those numbers back to your actual accounting records. So there should be a sufficient documentation in place, and this is especially important if there is a post-period adjustment made to those records. Next slide. Along with financial reporting is the tracking of program and administrative costs. The FPO will look to ensure that the administrative cost limitation is adhered to, that any indirect cost rate is properly being classified. Next slide. As you know, as part of the HDA, the Department of Labor ETA organization requires that financial reporting is conducted on an accrual basis. If you are operating a cash-basis system, there should be other means in place to track and report accruals back to DOL. There are 3 key characteristics of an accrual accounting system. Transactions are recognized in the accounting period in which they occur. Revenue is recognized when it's received or earned, and an expense is recognized when it is incurred. It could be a cash disbursement, or it could be delivery of goods and services for which no payment is made. This chart here illustrates the difference in timing between a cash-based system and an accrual-based system. Next slide. Cost classification, this is one objective that is unique to a financial monitoring review. The SPO will determine whether or not costs have been properly classified between program and administration. Your grant, the administrative costs are defined for this grant under 20 CFR 667.220. And it identifies things commonly considered administrative, and that would include accounting, budgeting, payroll, and personnel and property management, and other things that deal with the financial and administrative functions of your organization. That concludes core objectives 2 and 3. I will then turn it back to Elena.
Thank you, Debbie. Core activity 4, service product delivery, evaluates the grantee's capacity and effectiveness in delivering services to participants and employers. And during this part of the review, your FPO will be looking at the 5 elements listed on your screen. Additionally, the FPO will review a sample of randomly selected participant files and interview participants and partners about the program. And they may also visit your partner school sites during this part of the review. Some of the materials that will be reviewed during this part of the review are on your screen, and they're also listed in the core monitoring guide and in the review planning tool, which you can download as part of this presentation. So I'm going to give you a moment to just go over the slide. Okay, moving on. Core activity 5 is performance accountability, and it addresses the grantee's progress in meeting services level and expenditure goals, meeting performance outcomes goals, and managing subrecipient and contractor performance, and also using performance data for continuous performance improvement. And these are the 4 elements that we will be looking at. And a lot of it involves FPO's analysis of your reports as well as part of this part. So this slide lists the documents and information that should be made available for this part of the review. Basically your project implementation plan, spending targets, and performance data reports. So we completed the review, the overview of the core monitoring guide, and the review process concludes with an exit conference that's usually conducted on-site or on the last day of the review, or scheduled for, sometimes it's conducted on-site on the last day of the review or scheduled for a later date as a conference call. The exit conference must occur within 7 days after the end of the review. During the exit conference, the FPO provides a summary of the issues identified during the review and discusses the next steps that include an on-site monitoring review report and the corrective action plan. The on-site monitoring report is issued to the grantee within 45 days after the exit conference. The report addresses all findings resulting from the review. A finding is defined as a violation of compliance requirements included in the Statement of Work, federal regulations, policies, and the SGA. Each finding in the report contains a description of the compliance violation, the cause of the violation if it's known, the citation supporting the finding as a compliance issue, and the requirement for appropriate corrective action by the grantee. The report may also discuss areas of concern, detailing those grantee activities related to effectiveness and objectives or indicators that have not been met. Any practices or processes that were found to be particularly effective or efficient will be included in the positive practices section of the report. The grantee will have at least 30 days to respond to the report. The report requires the grantees to submit a plan that describes how they will address the required corrective actions. This document is called the Corrective Action Plan, or CAP. Findings for which sufficient information is provided in the grantee's CAP will be closed. Additional corrective actions will be provided for the findings that remain open or need additional time to be resolved. All findings should be resolved by the end of the period of performance to ensure a smooth closeout of the grant. Here are some suggestions to minimize or avoid findings altogether. We recommend that you know and understand your grant agreement, the solicitation for grant application, and the applicable administrative requirements. Ensure that the supporting documentation for all financial and programmatic activities of the grant is maintained. And feel free to contact your FTO if you have any questions related to the grant. There's a document that lists common grant findings and is available for download as a handout for this webinar. And this is our Q&A slide. I'm going to turn to our moderator now.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Alina. I know that was so juicy. It was so much, and I just want to let you all know that we have met our capacity for this webinar. People can't get in, and they're very not happy right now with us. So I'm happy that you all were able to join us, can hear us, and can see the PowerPoint slide. I'm going to ask folks, I know some people cannot hear us at all, and I think Angela's going to type it in there. If there's any questions at this time, that was a lot of meat, and I know that we probably have some questions. We have 2 experts in the field on the phone right now to answer those questions for you. So please take a moment to do 2 things. If you have a question for Alina or Debbie, please put that in the Q&A area, and I'll look at those. And secondly, we have a poll up here that Debbie just wanted to get a feel for who's on the call with us today, the webinar today, and it's a polling question. You probably see a polling question on your right-hand side that just asks, what is your role in monitoring? We're going to keep that open for another 2 minutes. Some people have been answering that. Some people have not. Please just take that poll real quick so we can have a feel for who's on here with us. And I forgot to remind you all of that prior to us getting started. So I'm going to look at these Q&As as I can. And Debbie and Alina, I know you're with me, so I don't see any questions yet. No, all I see is that people can't get in. Let me, okay. Any questions for us so far, ladies and gentlemen? Do you see any questions? Any questions? So we're all good? Okay.
Alicia, can they fill out the polling question?
Sure. Let's everybody get a chance to fill out the polling question. I think Angela can. Let's give 1 more minute. Again, there's 2 polling questions on your right-hand side. It just asks you, have you ever been visited by your federal project officer? And the second one says, what is your role in monitoring? 1 more minute, and then we can see what we have. Angela, you can close it out now. Does it give us a report? We're learning. The poll has ended. Any results, Angela? It's thinking. We're learning how to work this system, everybody. Bear with us. So Angela's going to tell us. She's yelling at me across the hall. So, okay. We'll find out who we have on the line in a second, Debbie. And we're going to keep it going. I'm going to go to the next part since we haven't seen any questions yet. I'm surprised there's no questions. I have lots of questions myself, but we'll get those later. I'm going to continue this presentation, and Debbie, we're going to get those polling results for you shortly. Regarding participant files, there's one question. Hold on, there's a question. There's a question. Hold on, everybody. Can you see it, Angela? Angela's sending it to me. Does supplies fall under indirect or direct costs? That's from Yolanda from PG County. I guess that's Debbie?
Normally, supplies, if they're related to supplies in support of the actual participants, they would be charged directly to the program. If it's supplies that are tied to, working with the financial officer, the accounting unit, it may in fact be an indirect cost. If you have an indirect cost rate agreement It specifies what costs are contained in that pool in order to distribute that rate. So if you don't have that in place, or if you don't have a copy, I would ask the person that was involved in preparing that indirect cost rate proposal. If not, the cost allocation plan should identify when supplies would be considered a program cost and when they would be an admin cost. So it isn't an easy answer because we know that there's supplies that can be provided to participants.
Okay. So we do have a question from Veronica's asking, is there a clear definition for indirect costs that we can give our folks or let them know where that is? Hello, Debbie? Oh, sorry, Deb.
Yes, yes. If we go to the cost principles, if you go to the chart, I forgot what page it was on, but any of the cost principles that are applicable to your organization defines what direct costs are. And those are costs that does not have a direct benefit to that program. They cannot be easily tied out to an individual program, but it does support the program in some way or form. So, for instance, if you have a unit that is specific to, processing payroll checks, that technically could be an administrative cost. But if the costs that are also, if some of the things that they're doing is processing payroll for participants, that would have to be further defined because that portion of those services or the time being spent to process participant payroll is a direct service to that participant. So the Uniform Cost Principles provide some general standards in which to define direct costs and indirect costs.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Hopefully, Veronica, let us know if that helps or not, clarifying that piece. And again, ladies and gentlemen, please remember we have provided several handouts for you all on the community of practice that was sent out to you all yesterday. And one that I learned about that was very important was the EEO documentation that Debbie and Alina have educated us thoroughly on to make sure that you all have that documentation. There is a form there that you can use for each participant file, as well as making sure that you have that visibly hung somewhere where folks can see it, so you don't have that as a common finding. That is important to your grant. But we're going to keep it pushing and go into participant files. There were a lot of questions the last year or so regarding participant files, and we wanted to give a little bit of guidance on what that looks like. And I have a question. Kristen, you're asking me, will sample questions be sent? Please clarify what you mean by that. I don't understand that question, Kristen. LaRoche, can you clarify that? So we want to make sure that we talk about the files for each student that is involved in the program. So right now in this section, we will be talking about key FAQs, questions that have come into us that we thought were key to kind of clarify about participant files. We're going to talk about one key participant file tip that we believe is critical to participant files, and we're going to talk about, what you should put in your participant files. I mean, what we have put together is a great document. We've had our financial officers look at it. We've had our grant officers look at it. We've had the team look at it, the FPOs. We are all in agreement that this is a really great tool for you all to have, and this is the one that I asked you all to print out for this presentation. So I'm going to refer to it throughout the presentation for you all as we move forward. So the resource guide, again, that's what you have as an attachment. It has, again, 4 major components. It talks about key questions and answers, tips, as well as what you can possibly put in each file for each student. The most important thing about your participant files is that you want to make sure that you have proof of services and activities. That's key. The FPO, when he or she comes on site, again, they're going to pull or ask for a sample of participant files. That could be 10, that could be 20, and they are looking to make sure that for Sam, for Joe, or for John, that there is evidence that work has taken place for those young people, that they have participated in mentoring, that they've had an internship, that they have done certain types of training, that they have been awarded certificates if that's what you say that they've done, and that there's evidence of that in each file. Of course, it is best if each file is uniform and organized. We'll talk about that in a second. And that there's case notes that that the young person was met with their mentor on such and such date, or that you have had conversation with this young person's parent on such and such date, and this is what the outcome is. So there is some great resources we're going to share with you on case notes. But we want to make sure there's a place or a common area to go to find out about our young people, okay? So that's what's in the resource guide. And again, that's about 14 pages that you have attachment for. Let's go through some of these key questions that have come into us and that we believe are really important to cover during this presentation. The first question is, what are the components of a participant file? And the components of a participant file vary, but these are some of the main ones that you need to make sure you have. Eligibility. We want to make sure there's documentation in there, especially that the young person is eligible for the grant, that the parent, this is very, very important, if the young person is under the age of 18, that the parent has signed off on their participation. If there's any waivers that need to have in there, that's important, that the young person and the parent, again, if they're under 18, you have to make sure that they can sign that there's equal opportunity documentations inside of that file, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more about those in a second. You want to make sure that any assessments, if this young person took a personality test or a job relations test, or they took something to see what kind of job they can fall into, that's all in that file to say that this young person is a part of the YCC program, and we're using this assessment to see where they fit best, what track they fit in, what other opportunities that they can have in this program. We want to make sure that any certificates, any diplomas that were arranged, or any type of credentials that were given to them while in the YCC program or in conduct, to be paid for it, or it was something that was given to them, a copy of that information needs to be in their file. The individual development plan, some type of notation that they have one, whether it's electronic or paper and pencil. Of course, if it's paper and pencil, a copy would be great inside the file, but if it's electronic, some type of checklist that says we have this in this system and we have access to it. Also, how are you tracking the employment and work experience, right? Their internship, are there timesheets? Is there something to say that the boss or the person who's managing their work experience or their internship has provided some documentation to you all regarding that experience for that young person? That's important to have in a participant file. Also, information about where they're going after graduation or exit, right? Did they go to college? Did they go to a work program? Where are they, right? Where are they going? Where are they now? Because we want to make sure that there's a quote-unquote follow-up component to their case management, right? Once they leave, we have to follow up with them within a certain period of time to see if they are where they say they're going to be. And of course, case notes. This is letting us know what the flow of the student's progression in the program and after exit is. Are participant files important? Yes, they're extremely, extremely important. This, of course, is a major component of the core monitoring. FPOs need to go to a place or to an electronic system where they can pull files to make sure that young people are getting the services that you said that you're going to provide to them, right? This is the evidence that they're getting the services, right? That they're eligible, that they have a plan of action, that they are getting their needs met as far as supportive services. Do they need tutoring that we can help them with? Do they need additional mentoring that we can help them with, okay? That we're helping them break down those barriers to be successful, and that they're achieving their goals, okay? Where is that evidence? You can tell us all you want verbally, but if there's no physical place to actually see that work being done, it's very hard to prove that. And of course, if we come to visit you all, or if the secretary wants more detail or somebody wants more detail, we need to have evidence of that taking place, okay? Is a participant file different than a school file? Oh, yes, it is. It is. A school file is not the same thing as a YCC participant file. A school file, a lot of times, is kept somewhere under lock and key through the principal's office or some type of school counselor. And a lot of times, many of our YCC grantees are contractors, or they're sub-recipients of the school system, and they do not have access to these school files. And also, we're providing an enhancement on top of the basic education that the young person is receiving through the school system. So the information that we're going to have in our YCC participant file is going to be a little bit more in-depth, a little bit more enriched compared to the basic school file that a young person may have. So yes, it is different. It does not mean that if I go into the school and I'm looking through their files, I can't just go into the principal's office and pull the school file. That may be some kind of restriction. But I can go to the YCC participant file because they are a part of the program and find out what's going on with this young person. The next question is on the next slide, but I'll answer it here. I have here a little arrow between PTS, the participant tracking system, and YCC, right? The next question is, can the PTS act as the student's participant file? And I'll just go to the next slide. And the question is basically not completely. The PTS collects data regarding the student's activities, and they're just checkboxes and data, right? But we need the evidence that that actual activity took place for those young people. So the PTS assists the participant's file, right? They don't act solely as it, because in the PTS, I know Evan's working really diligently to make sure that we record things, but it doesn't allow for things to be scanned into it. It doesn't allow for worksheets to be put into it at this point. So we want to make sure that if you're saying the young person is getting that activities, that, again, there's a physical place to actually find the evidence of that work. So we want to make sure that the PTS assists the participant file. So the FPO may come on the scene and may get a record for John Doe, and they may compare that to what's being said about John Doe in the PTS, right? We talked about performance accountability. How do we know that's happening for that young man in your program? And do participant files have to be hard copies? Not necessarily. It depends on what your program wants to use. Do you want to have a hard copy of everything where everything's in a physical file, maybe a six petition file? Do you want to have everything electronic? That is up to you and your plan for your program. Or do you want a hybrid of both? Some things are kept electronically, like the IDP, maybe some scanned documentation instead of you printing everything out and keeping a hard copy. But some things like the parent signatures, you may want to keep a live document in the file and scan it as well. It is up to you. What's most important about this is that you have a process and a procedure for your participant files, and that that FPO knows what that is, and that you and your team knows what that process is, and that the files are protected, whether it's lock and key if it's a physical file or it's electronic. There's some type of password or code system to protect these young people's information in the file. How will participant files be used during monitoring? We just learned about that, right? They're going to be pulled randomly. They're going to be looked at. They're going to be compared to performance. They're going to look for certain documentation to be in there, that a parent's signature is in there if the person's under the age of 18, that there's EEO documentation that the young person understands and the parent understands, that there are equal opportunities. This is an equal opportunity program, that we do not discriminate. These are federal funds, and as the federal government, we have to protect our interests in making sure that everybody who's receiving benefit from taxpayer dollars are not discriminated against. We have to make sure that these documentations are provided in each student's file. And what happens is, again, as we learned earlier, your career counselor, whoever your case manager is, will be interviewed by the FPO about the process of maintaining these records, who gets access to it, how often do you go in here, how do you collect this data for these records, and again, making sure that things are comprehensive, that you have a system put in place, and that things are in order when somebody goes to that record-keeping area. I just wanted to share one key tip with you all. As I've gone out on several site visits, I've had the privilege of going on several site visits in my career here. And one thing about that kind of is always one thing that I learned, and we talk about often here at the federal government at the national level with our FPOs about, is file maintenance. And of course, there's a section in the documentation I provided about other key activities that you can do to keep your files in order. But it is so important that you all and your team sit down and come up with some type of written description or standard for your files. What goes in everybody's file? Do you have a checklist? Is there a checklist on the front page that says this young person has this, and that? or we're missing this one. We got to go out and get it. We have to make sure we have this documentation, right? Do you have an internal control or internal quality assurance system to make sure that if somebody's out sick, that somebody has access to the files, that if somebody leaves the office or goes to another job, that there's a way to connect to that information, that we're not lost. I talked about the checklist, and just making sure you have guidelines for these items. And I provide at the end of this presentation links to other grantee links that provide samples of these opportunities, checklists, samples of how to put together, organize your files, what things you may want to have in it. And you want to make sure while you're doing the file maintenance that you are adhering to your FERPA regulations. And you all should know what those are, and you all should have that also written into your internal quality assurance system. In your document that I provide, I'm not going to go through everything in that list, but we provide about a 3-page list of what items can go into each section of the file. Timesheets, we talk about logging, we talk about sign-in sheets for mentoring. I know that mentoring happens, but how do you know mentoring's happening? I mean, is somebody just verbally telling you that the mentor met with the student, or do you have a log sheet? Do you have a mentor send an email that they met? I don't know how you all are doing that, but that's up to you all to keep a record of that is happening. We know in internships that the employer is supposed to fill out an evaluation of that experience. Do you have a copy of that in the participant file to make sure that the young person had a well-learned experience? Again, please recognize that this extensive list it's really long. It does not mean you have to have all those pieces in there. They're just suggested items to get your juices flowing as you prepare your checklist for your participant files, okay? So it's expansive, it's extensive. We use other lists from other grants. We pulled out as many examples as we possibly could. So please make sure that you use that to pull out what you need for your participant files. However, though I say that not everything on that list is required, there are some things that should be in everybody's file. I want to go through these and make sure that we all are clear about the fact that when we open up these files, these young people should have all these documents in them at least. Parental permission, if the young person's under 18, we need a signature from the parent. Equal opportunity, we provide in the handouts on your community of practice the literal language that you can use, copy and paste, and get a signature from the parent and the student on to make sure that everybody's okay and understands their equal opportunity. Updating completed IDP, whether it's this mention that the young person has IDP electronically or paper and pencil. Emergency contact information. We know that our young people, there's information at the school file, but you yourself as a case manager or as an administrator, if a young person's out on an internship and you need to get in contact with a parent or a grandparent, you need to have that information in their file. A photo waiver. Many of you all are taking pictures of these young people. Again, this is an outside grant that has come into the school. We want to make sure that it's okay for us to use these pictures as they're coming into us. We've been sharing your one-pagers throughout the country. We've been sharing with the secretary, and there's pictures of our young people on those one-pagers. We want to make sure it's legal for us to actually have those young people under the age of 18 and those pictures as we go around sharing all the wonderful work that you all have been doing, and that you have the right to share those young people's pictures. Release of information waivers. This allows you, as a case manager or as administrator of this program, to contact the employer, the internship, or the college to talk about the status of the young person, where they are in the process. Of course, the parent will be a part of this conversation, but it's a waiver to say I can call Community College X and ask about, again, John Doe's progress in the program. I can call Employer Internship Y and ask about John's activities. Without that waiver, it's not really, it depends on the situation, but it's not really legal for you to have that conversation without a waiver saying it's okay for me to call that person's employment, internship, or educational program. Eligibility documents, whatever application you may have in there regarding the entry for the young person, assessments, as we said, records of their participation in activities that we're paying for, that you're paying for through YC funds, supportive service information. Are you linking them to after-school activities that they need help with, mentoring, tutoring outside of the, tutoring services that are very important for them to maintain their grades or get higher grades. again, credentials and diplomas achieved, as well as any other outcomes that are achieved through this process, and case notes. So that's what should be in everybody's file. But again, the actual documentation that goes into that file is up to you. But these are the basics that should be in everybody's file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on this slide here. I'm actually done, but I'm going to actually go to some of these questions that we have up here. Alina and Debbie, you still on with me?
Yes, I am.
All right, let me go. I'm going back to Kristen's question. For key staff to be interviewed, are there any sample questions that can help, I guess, prepare folks for those staff interviews?
Yes, this is Alina, and I covered it in my slide. Yes, I mean, that's why we send you the core monitoring guide and the review planning tool. The core monitoring guide actually lists all the questions and all the things and materials that we're going to be looking at. So you can use that to prepare it. We use the guide. We don't ask anything on top of the guide.
Okay. So again, I provided that hyperlink, Kristen, to you in the slides. I could just go to that real quick in the resource section. You all have a copy of this presentation, but the core monitoring guide right here is on slide 65. Click on that, and you'll get I think it's like 80-something pages. It's pretty big. So we didn't print that out for you. Yolanda has a question for us. It's a suggestion. Perhaps a separate conference call or webinar should have been held on participant files. Agreed, Yolanda. And so this information didn't apply. You're absolutely correct, Yolanda. We could have broken this presentation up. I chose to do it together because I just wanted to make sure that participant files were important at this point, as well as monitoring. And some of the stuff did not apply to everybody, but hopefully you learned something today, and maybe next time we make sure we break it up. So thank you for your suggestion. Candace is asking, if we're submitting PTS data quarterly, would that count for some proof of some of what is being asked regards to the participant files, internship, documentation, mentoring meetings, so on and so forth? Well, Candace, for what I'm understanding about the PTS, and Evan is on. Evan, are you on? He's on somewhere. He's on the world. He's probably going to type in something. You can click to say that the young person has received those services, but there's no evidence of it. So how are you collecting the evidence that actually took place? Is there a sign-in sheet that your mentors do? Is there curriculum that your mentors are following? Is there a meeting topic that your mentors have? That information should be in the participant files. Yes, you tell us in the PTS they have an internship, they've gone to the internship, but what else is in there? Is there a time log? Where's the evaluation from the employer or the internship manager to let us know that actually did take place? So that's where we're asking you to get that physical evidence. Yes, the PTS does work to help us track that information, but where's the physical evidence that is taking place? Any additional questions for Debbie, Alina, or myself regarding participant files or monitoring? I have a question that just came in. Where can we find the poll? I think, how you doing, Puerto Rico? The poll is closed, so it's gone. I don't know what Angela, did we ever find out how to find out who answered what? We're trying to figure out how to work this thing. And any other questions? How did everybody feel about this presentation? Please type into the Q&A. Was this helpful? I know we have an evaluation coming out shortly, but are you confused about anything? We still have 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that you have all your questions answered and you're not kind of lost in space. Do you need additional technical assistance on anything? Anything you have questions about, please let us know now. We have our experts on. We have our FPOs on. We have a lot of folks. We have over 100 people on this line, and we're trying to make sure that we have answered your question. Okay, this is very helpful. Okay, Stacy, good. So I guess we may be ending a tad bit early. A couple of things I just want to kind of follow up with you all on. Keep putting your questions in. We have a training coming up in September 29th in a couple of weeks. Please mark your calendars. We're going to be sending out some information probably tomorrow or Thursday on parent and family engagement. That was a session during our conference, but something that we want to kind of go more deeply into, especially when we're asking you to have parents sign documentation. So we want to make sure that is done. Carla, thank you for your comment on there's too much on one webinar. If y'all want, let me know if you want another little piece on participant files. We'll do that. That's no problem for me to redo that or to do another piece. Don't also forget that we also prepared that 14-page document for you all on participant files. So if you want some additional information on that, I have no problem doing that for you all. And William, you know, you were mentioning that you didn't get all this guidance in your first year. Are we going to have findings? No, William, we're going to work with you to make sure that you don't have any findings. If you're concerned about any of those sections in the presentation that you believe that you are going to have a finding or you think that you're maybe weakened, please make sure that you highlight those areas and get with your FPO as soon as possible to discuss that your concern so that before they come out, that you want to make sure that you have it. William also is talking about the participant files. Participant files, you know, we're in this together, so if you are worried about your participant files, the first thing I would recommend you all do is get on your team and see where you are with participant files and see where you need to go as far as documentation. With some of these young people, you can go back and get a lot of this information. You can start from this point forward and see how you're collecting the data. You may have things you have to make copies of and get into a physical file or have uploaded or organized. So first, we got to see where you are now. If you need help with your participant files, your FPOs are there to help you. And, of course, we're here to help you as well. And your FPOs will let us know if we need to go into more in-depth assistance with your participant files. So, William, no, we're here to definitely make sure that we don't have any findings. We're not trying to claim any findings at this point, especially with participant files. And Yolanda saying we'll connect. One thing I want to make sure that we do from this point forward and encourage you all to do, if you're having challenges, if you want to know where you are, please get with your FPO and please make sure you CC YCC to let us know. Keep us in the loop how things are going. We're learning the way we came up with these questions for this PowerPoint presentation in regards to participant files. It's from all of you all asking us these questions and making sure that we're all on the same page with delivering you the technical assistance that you want. Alina and Debbie, we've been working on this presentation for well over a month to make sure it was clear. It was a lot in this presentation, and I thought that it would be great to kill two birds with one stone, but if it caused any confusion, we want to make sure that we clarify that for you all and get you the additional assistance that you need if that's what you desire. So any other questions for us? And also next year, mark your calendars. We are going to have our conference in July 2016. So you might as well just go on a market calendar, circle that up. Don't have any fun vacations without us. We're working on our conference approval package now. We will get a date to you as soon as we have a date here. If you have any suggestions on what you think should be handled in our next conference, I know we're a year out. Please keep sending it to YCC. Let us know what your suggestions are. And we are going to be working on that agenda over the next year to make sure we meet your technical assistance needs. Any additional questions? How are y'all? So we're going to be sitting on an evaluation, right? Angela's probably nodding her head. An evaluation is going to be coming out to you all shortly in the next, probably shortly within the next day. Please, please, please take that evaluation for us. We really, really want to know how we did. Again, I heard your concerns about too much information on one PowerPoint presentation. I will make sure that we and I want to make sure that we get that to you. I have a question that just came in. Some people have more background information than others. YCC one-on-one presentation that goes a little bit slower. I guess what we're hearing here is that some folks are new to YCC and they're new hires and they would like a one-on-one presentation. Now, we have done this last year for our grantee orientation, and we do have a presentation. I believe it was recorded. I have to find that for you, but I'm going to write this down in my notes. And Angela's, yeah, we have an archive presentation, and we have a PowerPoint for you on YCC 101. I will make sure to get that to you all soon. And Ms. Rivera saying, we can use sign-in sheets for supportive services activities. Do we have to include a copy of the sign-in sheet in the participant file? Great question. You tell us. I mean, if you have the sign-in sheet kept somewhere and the student has signed in, you may want to use like a checklist in the participant file that said that the student participated on this day, that day, and that day. And then if the FPO asks for the evidence that the student was actually in that particular session, you may have a place where you keep that actual sign-in sheet with all 20 students in it, and you can pull that out as your support. That's my recommendation, but please make sure you write that out and talk to your FPO about how do you keep that evidence going. And I think, Angela, am I done? She's running over. Oh, and Yolanda has one more question. She's yelling at me. Is there a detailed list of the type of allowable and disallowed costs? Debbie? Is there a list of allowable and disallowable costs?
There are items of cost that are specifically unallowable that are contained in the cost principles. But a lot of the costs that I see in the question are one of those things where it's not defined as unallowable or allowable. As long as it meets the objectives of the program, it could be allowable. There is a list, a generic list that is found in the one-stop financial management tag that is posted to our website. I think it's one of the appendices. I could send you the link to that.
Okay.
But it does not delve deeper into some of these questions about USB drives, books, and backpacks.
Okay. So thank you, Debbie, for providing
No
that,
problem.
the generic list. Debbie will get that to me, everybody, and we will definitely Yolanda, you want to get the link soon, Yolanda, I promise. We're going to upload that link, Yolanda, to our COP and get that to you ASAP as soon as we get it. Debbie has to get it to us first. And then, Don, I'm going to get you that YCC archive link at ASAP as well. Any other questions or requests for information? This was awesome, you guys. We had well over 100 people on here, and we had people who could not call in that were mad at us because there was not enough lines. And so we want to make sure that we and please make sure. I have a comment here from one of our FPOs. Make sure you reach out to your FPO when you hire your new staff. Make sure you reach out to your FPO to let your FPO know that you've hired new staff so that they can explain the program to the new staff person as well. We'll share with the documentation that we do have, but we want to make sure that you let your FPO know when you hire new staff, because that's one of their efforts to make sure that everybody's on the same page. They can help out the new staff member get on board with YCC. So thank you so much for our FPO. Put that into the chat to remind us, to remind you all to get with your FPO when you hire new staff. And we will post archive soon. We will have a transcript and archive of this webinar recorded. And we hope that this was beneficial to everybody. And don't forget to take your evaluation when it comes to you. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and take care. Alina and Debbie will be in touch shortly.
Okay, do we stay on the line?
Just hang on up.
Oh.
Okay.